Hello there and welcome to my Arty Corner here on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining me, and if you've subscribed, thank you so much. I hit that sort of like one of the YouTube milestones for 1,000 subscribers at the weekend, and I still can't get over that. So thank you ever so much. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed and you like what you see, please consider subscribing, because it's a nice thing to do. I do this to channels I like. I always subscribe. And it's also a way of letting me, the creator, know, the content creator, know that I'm doing things that are valuable. Of course, you can always leave me a comment if you've got a request for something you'd like to see me do or to help you with or whatever. I'm more than willing to do that. My name's Angela Porter. You can find me around the internet as Artword, and that's word, all one word, Artword, and word is spelt W-Y-R-D. And I'm an artist, amongst other things, best known for my adult colouring books. I was a science teacher for 28 years. I taught students aged 11 to 18, mostly 11 to 16, and those with what used to be called special educational needs are now called additional learning needs. And I also got the chance to teach alongside that for a couple of years art as well, which was always fun and enjoyable. Not that science wasn't, but art was different. And it was lovely to see young people express themselves and discover they could do art. I'll tell you a story about that if I remember in a moment, because I'll wax lyrical about my days teaching at times. The good things anyway. I steer away from the not so good things. So what you can see in front of you, or on the camera here, is I've been watching, like many of you will have, the Zentangle Project Pack 18 videos. And their Project Pack 18 contains squares of vellum. And I've been watching and being intrigued by it. And I remembered I had vellum in my stash from my years of experimenting with card making and mixed media and stuff like that. So I've still got a fair amount of it left. So yesterday, the day before, can't remember when, I cut a couple of sheets up into some pieces. I think I've got 3.5 inches. I think it's 3.5 inches, 4.5 inches. And I did have a couple of sweet little ones, sort of like, oh, yeah, I've got all different kinds of sizes here. And to round the corners, I just have these corner rounders. Like that one hadn't done a very good job because I haven't put it in quite right. And these, I've got one by Tonic, I've got another one by Exacto, I think. Is it Exacto? I don't know, that's the symbol. But if you throw into Amazon corner rounders for card making or, you know, journal making or whatever, you'll have loads coming up. I've got a couple of new ones coming because these are not working as nicely as I'd like. They're old. And another one that does it slightly more ornate in different corners, because I am rounding my corners quite a lot here. So I did that. I've also got a piece of, or some pieces of mixed media paper out, some of which are the same size. Oh, look at that one, you can see there. That's annoying me, so that'll have to be sorted. That's better. And that one's a bit weird as well, so that one will have to be, that one's not going to be sorted. So, but they will lie on top of one another. And the lovely thing about vellum, as you can see, it is translucent and you can see through it. Now I've got the plain paper out, not because I'm going to draw on it, although I could, but I may use some distress inks to colour the background. So if I pop this on top here, you can see how everything comes through, but it's muted, and then I could draw on the top. So if you imagine it without the patterns there, the colours underneath will come through. You can also colour vellum in plenty of different ways. You can use just about anything water-based products, except for things like Tombow markers or the Carin Pro markers, brush markers. And fine liners aren't recommended because it will warp, but it does really nicely with, now where have I put it? Excuse me a moment, I popped it into here. With fine liners, surprisingly. And this is one, oh, where did I put my white paper? See, I'm being a complete and total muppet here now. this was one I was playing around with, and it ended up being, how can I make this work? And though you can't see, you may not be able to see very clearly against the white, but I coloured the patterns in here. If I turn it over, you'll see how the vellum mutes the colours down. And these were these Staedtler fine liners. And the lovely thing is, if your colouring isn't perfect, it doesn't matter, because the vellum just mutes it beautifully. I did use, don't know if you can pick up there, hint of green and perhaps a little bit of brown in this outer border here. Those were alcohol markers, which are very much more subtle. These were pastel colours, so I know that if I want to use alcohol markers, I need to use colours that are a bit bolder. This bit here, and if I pop this on the table, you'll be able to see, this I was drawing with a white jelly roll. And me and jelly rolls don't get on at the best of times, and we really don't get on well on vellum. And then, of course, my brain kicked in, because one of the things that I did or explored during my years of trying different arts and crafts out and trying different things out, and I have done sort of Zentangle or entangled art drawings, abstract drawings on vellum, is that you can emboss it. You can use ball-ended tools and other specialist tools to emboss the surface. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but I don't know if you can pick up. You might be able to pick up, it looks like this is bending down a little bit. That's not an optical illusion, that's because it is, because this white line is actually raised. And I can actually feel it here. And on the reverse, you can see the lines aren't quite as white as well. That's the white jelly roll. And these are where I've made these lines. This comes from a paper craft. It's a very old one. It's called Pergamano. And it uses vellum and embossing tools, the ball ending tools. What do they call them? They used one, they had one in the, not the last pack, the pack before last, I think it was, in the project packs. And it wasn't embossing, they used a different term for it. And they used it to indent paper so you could bend it. With vellum, you can use it to draw on it. And that's what I want to explore with you today. This was my test piece, and it was reminding me about things. I'm not so fussed on the colours that I've used here. I am intrigued, kind of, to use black as an outline for them. I don't know if you can see the white in between the black. Yes, you can. That isn't gel pen. That is embossing. And just to show you, I've got two tools. I've got a range of these somewhere. I've got quite a few of them, but I don't know where the rest are. I've put them somewhere. And these are really quite inexpensive. They're called nail dotting tools, but they're exactly the same things as the tools for Pergamano or the engraving styluses or whatever else they call them, embossing styluses. This I picked up on Amazon. I think it was about £10, British pounds. And it has got loads of tips of different sizes stored inside. I think there's 8 in total. And I've got a fairly small one on this end, which is about the same size as this one. And I've got a slightly bigger one on this end, which is definitely smaller than this one. This is lovely because I can pick a tip to use and keep it. These are really convenient because you have a whole range in front of you to use. So, the other thing I've got underneath here on top of my cutting mat is a silicone mat. And that has a double purpose. One is it's got a bit of softness to it, a bit of give to it. A few sheets of paper will work, or cork board, something like that. Nothing too soft. You need a bit of softness, but not too soft. I have actually got a proper mat for Pergamano somewhere, but like everything else, I've put it somewhere safe, and I don't know where safe is anymore. That particular safe is. It'll turn up when I least expect it. They always do. I looked in the obvious places, and this allows you to push into the vellum a little bit more than you can on a hard surface. But again, it's about trying things out and seeing what works for you. I don't suggest going out and buying anything new. Just try things. If you've got it in your stash, give it a go. If you like what you see me doing and you want to give it a go, by all means, go and buy and look around for things and see what you can get, because you can get things. I don't know what on earth. Silicone is a pain. Everything sticks to silicone, and to get it off can be an absolute nightmare. It's non-stick, but at the same time, it's also sticky. It loves dust and fluff and my crumbs from breakfast. I have to have my breakfast up here. Right, so if I start by showing you, you work on the reverse side of the vellum. So you'll be working in a mirror image, but for Zentangle, that doesn't matter because we're creating patterns. We're not creating anything that is meant to be realistic. So I'll use this one, and all you do is you draw on the vellum with the ball tool. And this is going to be not quite so easy to see because it's faint on this side, but if I turn it over, you can see how white these marks are. And so I'm going to use vellum as a way of you can see that if I do it on this side, you can see the difference in how white they are using the same ball tool. So this one, I've worked this way. If I go over them, I can get them to become whiter. And the trick apparently is not to press too hard because it does warp your vellum. This has been under the craft mat here for a couple of days, flattening back out, because as I work it will curl, both with moisture from my hands, from the air, and also from the way the vellum is it changes shape as you put pressure on it. You're essentially pushing this out and sort of like increasing its size. So with anything, when you increase or decrease the size of something, sort of like when you stretch, or if you take a piece of fabric and you push it together, it's going to ripple up and down. Or this is the same kind of thing, sort of like we're making ripples in it. So it's going to warp a little bit. And again, you can see the difference there. So as long as you remember which side is which, and it's quite easy to work out because the side you're going to work on, the lines aren't going to be as embossed as on the other side. So it's better to work, if I go back to this, it's better to work with a lighter hand. Put what you've done to one side for a couple of hours under a heavy book, or I put it under my craft mat because, you know, it holds things down and it'll be fine. And come back to it and go over it again if you want them whiter, rather than pressing hard, because you run the risk then of doing, I don't know if you can see what I have done, but along here, can you see, I don't know if you can see there, but you can see there's like little blobs along here. I actually was using a very fine ball point and I broke through the vellum. So though it's fairly sturdy, it's very easy to pierce it. And piercing is something else you can do to add pattern to vellum. But I'm not going to do that because I've never been very good at it. So I've got a nice new piece of vellum here. And I am going to, doesn't matter, the sides are exactly the same. Oh, the other thing is that if you find that your vellum is getting, it's not so easy to draw on it, the pen isn't running smooth, then a tumble dryer sheet is brilliant for rubbing the surface of the vellum with. And I'll be back in a moment because I'll go and get one because I've got a pack here. Okay. Excuse the clunks and everything. I could have turned the video off, but it was only for a second. So this is a tumble dryer sheet. So what I'm going to do, oops, that shouldn't come out, but it does. Oh, and that one does. So I'm just rubbing those with the tumble dryer sheet. And then I'm just going to rub across the back side of the vellum with this. And it sort of like says, oh, it takes the static away from the vellum. No, it doesn't. It adds a very thin layer of a lubricant, basically. Whatever there is there is a conditioning product, fabric conditioner on here, and it just makes it so smooth to run the ball across. And if it gets sticky again, you just start again. So I'm going to use, not this ball on here, I'm going to use a slightly larger one, because hopefully you're going to be able to see what's happening. But I'm going to do a pattern on here, which I woke up in my head this morning with. And it's one that I've never been very good at. But it's called Senna. And what I will do is I will get a piece of black card out of my, ooh, wrong place. It's over here. It's right next door to me. I am all over the place today. You'll have to excuse me. If I use black, you can see what's happening here. So Senna, or Sina, is a Zentangle pattern, which I said it doesn't have a lot, I don't have a lot of luck with. But I'm going to try something today and see what happens. So I'm going to take this out and down, and then at the other end, instead of adding quite a lot of weight at the bottom, I'm going to add a spiral. So I've gone from the point of this S shape down, around here, around to create a spiral. Then I've connected the spiral to that line by tracing over it and then just making the line go this way. It's really easy to trace over these lines. There's almost like a dip there where the stylus that you're using will actually go into. I'd say the hardest thing is to work out which side is the one you're drawing on and which one isn't. So I'm going to I'll do that again on the card. And I'm going to start this way, and I'm going to, actually I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do some aura-ing around this, and perhaps another one going around here, a bit like the swirly patterns that I did a couple of days ago, or well, I say a couple of days ago, it's more than a couple of days ago. So you can sort of see that, but you see it so much better when I turn it over, because it's a bit whiter here. I'm not getting as good a line here as I would get if I just use this, and I know this is going to be difficult for you to see, but if I do the outside one and turn it over, you can see the difference that working on a slightly softer surface makes. And that card is so stiff that it doesn't matter how many layers of it I use, it's going to be like working on a hard table. So I'm just going to go over these while I've got this out. And I'm not pressing hard. I'm terrible with this because my head says you've got to press harder because you're trying to push into it, which is true, we are. But no more than if you were writing with a ballpoint pen. You know, in fact, even not that hard. And you might see already, can you see how it's beginning to bend, the paper, how it's beginning to warp? There's nothing you can do about that. It's a function of this. Okay, so for the next one, I'm just going to turn this around and hopefully we'll see. In fact, if I put the black underneath, I can do it light on the black so you can see what the design is, and then I can go and go over them on the softer surface. So I'm adding a line here. and one here. And there. So it's almost like I'm curling everything around here in a wave-like way. So you can see that there. If I turn it over, you can sort of see those, but I'll do this here. The lovely thing about this as well is that if you prefer to, you can draw your design on the front side with, if you can get a white gel pen to work on the surface, brilliant. If you can't, with a white pencil or a dip pen with ink. And then on the reverse, you can actually trace over your design with the stylus. And even if you don't trace it perfectly, it's amazing how forgiving this is, as long as you use a fine enough line. And if you use white pencil, you can often erase it from the paper afterwards as well. So you can see how this is beginning to build up. So again, I'll just do my next one, and I am going to take this out from that line. I'm going to add another spiral here, as you can see. Just tidying some lines up that I can see as I go, because I can see where there's a bit of a gap in some. And you can see where my spiral is. It's there. And so I'm going to take a line from this and have that join back to the line that the spiral came from, like that. Again, if I turn it over, you'll see it a bit more clearly. And then I'm going to add some of these auras here just to widen this spiral. Perhaps these look like curly hair. If I turn it over, you can see what they're beginning to look like. And again, I'm just going to take some of these and just start to have some lines that will connect here. So I am going to very quickly just go over these on the blue part. And while I'm doing that, I said I was going to tell you a story. It's a true story. It's an account of my time teaching and teaching art. My very first art lesson was right at the beginning of the autumn term when we had the new students in. And so the morning and some of the afternoon was spent with your new form if you had a year 7, 11-year-olds as a form. If not, it was spent doing preparation, whatever. The first sort of like lessons of the day were in the afternoon. And my very first lesson was with a year 7 class, special needs class, who'd never met me before. I'd not met them. And they would have learned, they'd have me for both art and science, which was always a bit confusing for any student. You can see how the white makes, or the going over on this paper here makes such a difference. And so I had them for their art lesson. And I know that so many people believe that to be good at art, you have to be able to draw as if you're drawing a photograph. And if you can't do that, you're no good at art. And it's so sad. I don't know where people get this idea from. I think it may be because focus on art often is on the old masters, which do look like photographs simply because people didn't have cameras back then. And so I knew that I wanted to focus on a lesson that would build their confidence up and give them and me a chance to do well in art. me as a new teacher, well, not new teacher, I've been teaching for a long time by then, the best part of 20 years. But to give them the chance to discover that they could do art and to change their ideas of themselves and to come in willing to give things a go and to see what happens. So the lesson, you know, the first lesson I asked them, well, first question I asked them, apart from their name and what they were hoping to do in life and a little bit about themselves, because I always start like that. Not that I always remember, I try my best to, but sometimes I remember what somebody's interested in more than their name for quite a while. And one of the children in the class, one of the students there, I'd had a warning about, oh, be careful. They, you know, the twins they were, or what? This was one of a pair of identical twins. They were nearly identical. You could tell them apart, but they were identical twins. They're really trouble. They caused a lot of trouble in primary school. They're going to be really difficult, you know. As we used to get warnings about students like that, which sometimes I thought, you know, was useful and sometimes it wasn't, because for some people it would give you a preconceived idea and expectations of them, so it becomes self-fulfilling. Anyway, so one of the first questions said, right, well, you're here to do art. I know you've got me for science, but this is an art lesson. So I'm able to teach both. And because I was teaching children with special needs, I also had a lot of learning support assistants, care staff in there with them, because a lot of them were disabled, as well as having learning difficulties. Some were in there because of their disabilities, because they were not making progress as quickly as others, perhaps because of hospital stays or ill health or other problems, or just because they were delicate souls. A whole mix from, you know, all kinds of issues and problems. And so they always took part in the lessons as well, and which was great. Well, certainly they did in mine anyway, because I encouraged that, and I encouraged modelling how I wanted students to be, and not to feel self-conscious about putting your hands up and getting things wrong, because even though I knew they knew the right answers to questions, they'd often give the wrong answer, to see that I wasn't going to tell them off or make them feel silly. You know, I had a way to do it. So we had a good working relationship like that. And so one of the first questions I said, right, in art, how many of you think you're good at art? Put your hand up. One hand tentatively went up and said, well, I think I'm all right at it. Okay, that's brilliant. That's great. Okay then, how many of you think you're no good at art? And everybody else's hands went up, including the support staff. And I said, how many of you think to be good at art, you've got to be able to draw like it's a photograph? Every single hand went up. Well, I'm here to tell you that each and every one of you is absolutely wrong. And they looked at me shocked. I said, we're going to have a look at some pictures of art, great art, where the artists haven't drawn like photographs. So we looked at things by Kandinsky and Picasso and Modigliani, you know, with the very long, thin necks, and some work of the Fauves where they used different colour palettes. And I can't remember the name of the artist, but there was one painting I found where the skin was all shades of green. And at the end of this, and showing them some very simple, very abstract work, I said, how many of you think you might be able to do art now? Oh, no, I didn't ask them then. See, I'm getting confused now. So I said, right, okay. Do you need to draw like a photograph to create wonderful works of art? Which is your favourite? We had all of these kinds of questions. I said, now we've got enough time now for you to start some art. And I'm going to show you what you're going to do, and you're going to do this. So I had these huge A3 photographs that had been laminated of tropical plant leaves with beautiful shapes and patterns on. So they were abstractions themselves, so sections of them blown up. But they had really interesting shapes and patterns on. So they had to use a piece of tracing paper. Oh no, I lie. We gave them a piece of square paper like this and a viewfinder which was about the same size but just had a smallish square hole in the middle. And they had to move this to find an interesting part of the leaf. And I said, it's got to be interesting. You've got to have more than 6 lines or shapes on it. I said, oh, perhaps I said 7, because I like odd numbers. So they all did this. And I said, now, I want you to see those lines. And on your piece of paper, I want you to draw those. No colour, just pencil. I want you to draw these in to fill the paper. It doesn't have to be an exact copy. I just want you to draw them roughly where they are. And by the end of the lesson, we had just enough time for that to clear things away. Everybody had done that. I'd gone round, looked at each person's work, and I could see that I could tell which part of the leaf they'd drawn it from, because I'd asked them to take their viewfinders off the leaf and just leave their picture, and I'll tell you which part of the leaf you drew. And they were amazed I could tell, because they thought I wouldn't be able to, that they'd have made it. I said, no, it's obvious, it's that part. And I hadn't cheated, I'd been good. And after we tidied up, we had a couple of minutes left. How many of you enjoyed doing that? Every hand went up. How many of you think that you could be good at art? Most hands went up. A couple took a little while to go up, including a couple of the care staff, which was interesting. And then it was time, the bell went, time for them to go home. And this young lad that I'd been warned about came up to me at the end of the lesson, and he said, Miss, I want to thank you. He said, that was the best lesson ever. And he said, do you know what? He said, I think I might be good at art. And do you know what? He did. He developed. And I think he did do GCSE in art and got a really, really good grade. He carried on with that love of art. And that class they were fantastic from the day I had them. They're one of those classes that are. But that pleasure they had in discovering that they'd always been told they wouldn't be any good at it for whatever reason, because of people's misconceptions of what art is and what art isn't. You know, if you can make a mark on paper with anything, you can draw a shape on paper with any tool at all. If you can use colour in a way that pleases you, if you can knit, sew, make things out of clay, whether they look like something, whether they're just beautiful things to look at and have pattern and texture, are tactile. It matters not. If you can design your own clothes, your own knitting patterns, quilts and so on, you're being creative, you're being artistic. And that's always been something I think I've had in mind in doing this channel if I got followers. Because how many of you have said, I'm no good at art, but, you know, I quite like to doodle and draw patterns. Well, that is art. It's how you put these things together in a pleasing way and it expresses yourself. And I've just seen this here. And here was me looking at this thinking, oh, what a mess I've made of it. And I have. But I really like how this is flowing over here and along here. I did that completely by accident. But I'm thinking, oh, if I put a few more in here, it will look like this is growing through behind this, wouldn't it? Yeah, I know. There we are. Grasshopper brain. So that's my story. And that class and other classes I taught art just loved to do art. So I had a deal with them. So, oh, do we have to do science? Yes, you've got to do science. Can't we do art? So I said, well, if we get all the science done that I need to do in the lesson, then yes, we can do, I'm drawing on the wrong side here, then yes, we can do art. And, you know, if there's time left, either at the end of a lesson or, you know, by the end of the week, because I saw them 4 lessons a week. It's a lot. And, what was it, 5? No, I think it was 4. And I said, if by the end of the week we've done all the work I want to do in the week, then we'll have an extra art lesson. How does that sound? Oh, fab. But only if everybody's done all of the work. And I said, if we haven't done all of the work, then the last lesson, And I did have them on the last lesson of the week on a Friday afternoon for art, for science. I said, what we'll do, we'll spend time making sure everybody's got their work finished. If you finished, you'll be able to carry on with your art. If you haven't, you'll have to get your science finished properly. No half measures here. No sort of like answering things badly or doing things untidily just to get it done. It's all got to be done properly. We're going to focus on this, and then, yes, we can do it. We can have some more art. And every class I had like that would work like Trojans to get the work done, just so they could have an extra hour of art at the end of the week. And I had the blessing of the head of my science department for this, because he could see how well they were working and what progress they were making, because we had to keep track of that. And his words were, I don't care what you teach when you teach, as long as you get the work done, the pupils make progress, and if we happen to be inspected, you're teaching the right lesson in the right time. I said, not a problem. And that's how we worked it. And it worked like an absolute charm. I tried to do that, find that thing that classes would love, to get them to focus on work, to make the best efforts they could, so they had that treat. There was a year 11 class, but I had them all the way through school, because with special needs classes I would teach them from the time they started the school until they were 16 and were leaving. So I would teach them for 5 years. So I got to know my students particularly well, and they me well. And this was another class who was absolutely gorgeous from the time that they came in. And they would just, there we go, you can see, they would just work so hard, and they absolutely loved discussion. And they were always full of relevant questions, not irrelevant ones to waste time. But you'd be talking about something, and they'd be so interested, something will grab their attention. So one time I was teaching about density and buoyancy and things that float. And one question was, well, miss, why did the Titanic sink then? Oh, why did the Titanic float when it was made of iron? So we talked about that. We talked about density, about it being filled with air. And the question came then, well, why did it sink? Well, you tell me. Well, it hit an iceberg. Well, yes, it hit an iceberg, but why did that make it sink? Well, it put a hole in the side, yes. So why did that make it sink? Well, water got in. Yes, water did. So why did the water make it sink? Well, it filled up the bottom of the ship. And why would that make it sink? Because it pushed the air out. Exactly. and air is very light and water is much heavier. So it made the ship heavier. Yes, and it sank. Oh! And then there were all these questions about the Titanic and what went wrong and all the weird conspiracy theories. And we ended up doing a whole term's worth of project work on the Titanic, which was it was quite multi-curricular, multi-subject based, because we looked at history, we looked at the building of the Titanic, what it was made of, how it was designed, why it was designed so it wouldn't sink, with the double hulls and the individual compartments in the lowest decks of all, down in the boiler rooms and so on. And they learnt so much about the people that were on there, and they wanted to know about the foods they would have had and how they would have kept the foods fresh, and what different classes were on the ships and why people travelled in different classes and why the foods were different. And all kinds of things. And of course we watched the documentaries about the discovery of the wreck of the Titanic at the bottom of the Atlantic, when Rob Ballard's lot found it on one of their deep sea mapping missions. And they learnt so much, not necessarily in the way that it was approved of teaching, but it was in a way that worked for them. And the discussions, and you know, the discussions of whether the Titanic should be lifted and preserved or left there as a grave, because, you know, thousands of people lost their lives. And although there's very little, well, there wouldn't be skeletons left after all this time, because even deep down in the sea things get degraded and damaged and so on, certainly when they're organic. And like bodies are organic. But the discussion got very heated because all the students said no, it should be left there. And so the LSAs took up the side of, well, no, of course we should bring it up. People need to learn. They want to see it. It will be great for, you know, tourism and money raising and things like that. And the kids just weren't having it, and it got really, really heated, but in a good way. And you know, for them to be able to air their views and to speak like that was a rare thing for them as well. So they learnt that way. So, but that class I taught art to as well, and they loved to do anything that was arty. I only taught them for a year, I think. But any project I could give them that was arty, they absolutely loved. So I've been doing this while I've been talking, and you can see I'm filling in spaces and gaps at the moment. But what I've been doing is I've been working in this Senna-like way where I'm spiralling off from one of the points here and just using how the lines fall. So here, the next line will follow this one here, and in some way. But at some point, these are going to change, and I'm going to have lines that perhaps join up here somewhere. But it's very sort of like, much like the sea. So I'm putting some of the perks in. I haven't done a very good job there of these ones. Yeah. Filling this in. Now then, I may not have got those. So you can see now, hopefully you can see how much this has curled. So this will need a good weight on top of it for a while. But I'm happy with how it's working. This side is the side I'm embossing, impressing in. And this side is the one where it's raised up and it's very much more opaque. And I'd begun to start working round here as well from this side. And although I've got some rather odd lines here because I wasn't paying attention to where my lines were going, because it's Zentangle, yeah, I am working on the right side. I can add things as I wish. I'm going to flip my tool round because for these ones here, I just want a smaller tool to get in those places. Something else I do want to show you about this, and this is how I can put highlight on. With Pergamano, often you use shading in the ends, so you get the brightest regions at the ends and the lightest, you know, sort of like the brightest white there, and any colour in the background or the duller colour will be in the middle. But to add shading, as it were, you use a very light touch and you just flick this over. It's barely noticeable here because you still need this. And the idea of flicking is that these then will trail off. So if I show you this, I don't know if you can pick it up, but there's a hint of much some white that is there. It's only a hint of it at the moment, because you can keep on going until you've added as much as you like. And also you need to practice how much pressure you need to put on this. But the idea is that you start light in the middle and then fade off. So I've got a better bit there. So I can add my highlights with this, and then the shadows will go when I add colour. So it's starting to go. So let me carry on. Hopefully, which way? Yeah. You can feel the raised ones on one side, and it doesn't feel raised on the other. So I had some really lovely times teaching art, and I did my A-level art, AS and A-level art with the sixth form at the time. And that encouraged them to do really well. They got the best results ever because they had members of staff working on their A-levels, because of myself and a couple of others. And as part of our continuous professional development, the school funded it, which was brilliant. And we all passed. And the sixth form did really brilliantly as well, because they were spurred into not being shown up by the oldies, as it were, in a nice way. But they had an input from other teachers who had a different view on creativity in art and different skill sets and so on. And I certainly spent a lot of time with students, working with them and suggesting things. And I had a huge stash of odd materials, media, that I was beginning to build up because I was just so fascinated. And I'd bring it in for, because you'd all talk about your art projects, your exam projects. You had to do everything yourself, but it was perfectly fine to talk about them and to get ideas and suggestions from other people. It was up to you to execute them. And one student made these beautiful ceramic models of sea urchins. And I happen to have in my ever-growing art material stash some pearlescent acrylic inks. They were the De La Rowney ones. Can't remember the name of them. But they were beautiful. And I said, these would look lovely with this. So we decimated my inks because, the concept of a little is better than more. But they did look lovely, and because they hadn't been glazed, the ink settled into the colours settled into the ceramic, into the fired clay, and it was absolutely gorgeous. As it became a lot softer and subtler, but the pearlescent bits, the shiny bits, the mica, stayed on the surface and gave it this lovely sheen. It's the best way I can describe them. They're beautiful, and they blended so beautifully one into another to get gradations of colour. So this is getting all very Zentangle-y here, and I've been talking about art and me for a bit of a while now. But the lesson is that you don't have to be able to draw a straight line or a perfect circle, or even to be able to draw a face like a portrait, or a person sat there, or perfect still figures that look like a photograph, still life, like fruit, to be good at art. And Zentangle and other similar forms of art, because there are other things, and doodle art and all kinds of things, are as valid ways of self-expression and allow you to express yourself however you wish. You're given the basic deconstructions of patterns, and in Zentangle that exploration of them is encouraged. So looking at them, trying them, making them your own, working on variations, it's encouraged. People come up with new deconstructions of patterns, either ones they've been inspired by from things they've seen in the world around them, or completely new ones that they haven't seen. Though I think sometimes there's no such thing as a pattern that has never been created before, or at least not in its own, because humanity's been creating patterns since we put patterns on walls in caves and carved patterns into stone, and probably longer than that even. But the evidence of those patterns hasn't survived. So it may not have been on stone, it may have been on things that would have worn away in time, or stone that would have. And of course it's hard to undo perhaps the lessons of the past, what people have always told you, what you were learnt in school. It's like adding colour to things, you know. I can remember, you know, sort of like the emphasis that was put on colouring inside the lines when I'd started school. And so you learn that you colour inside the lines if you want to get good marks or a good report. And it's only now as a teacher, well, I say now, but it was only as a teacher, and particularly when I started doing art, that I realised, oh, that was all about fine motor control and hand-eye coordination. It wasn't about art necessarily, though they did frown on you using strange colours for, I say strange, different colours for sky and sun and trees and things. They did want it to be what they really were. Whereas find out that if you ever look into the FAUVs, which is FAUVRES, they used colours, if I remember rightly, to represent the emotional feeling of a place, or they were used symbolically. So you'd have the drawing that resembled the place, but the colours were completely not natural, you know, blue trees and strange greens and pinks and purples and all sorts. And it's rather a lovely way of doing landscapes. Well, I think so. So I'm doing this in the same kind of way, same kind of approach I did with the wavy patterns last week. I do need to work on some of these because some of these are a bit patchy. It's a lot easier to see on a dark background. My other mat, my Pergamano mat, is a deeper purple, but it is what it is, so I'll work on this and get it. But you can see where here, going round from here, around here was my original line, and I'm still keeping that in mind as I'm working, as I start to have lines that are changing shape, and I'm filling sections up with beads and seed poddy type things and swirls. And look, there's even something here, it's a bit like crescent moon. In fact, I think I'm going to fill the whole of this section up with some crescent moon, which I'll do now. Just checking which side I need to draw on. So I've always wanted, as with science, as in my life, is to encourage people to believe in themselves, to overturn, well, perhaps not always, but certainly as a teacher, I've always wanted my students to have a bit more belief in themselves, a bit more confidence, especially when they come with having been told or having been able to see that they're not doing quite as well academically as others, or they're not doing as well in some things and they never get praised for anything they do. You know, it's, yeah, progress is important, but every child's different, and some of them come with an awful lot of a backstory in life. That we know nothing about, their home circumstances, things they've gone through in life, and all of these things that contribute to somebody's self-view and self-worth. And so if I can help somebody to build themselves up in whatever way it can, then I think that's a good thing. So here is what I've achieved so far, as well as a lot of talk and blather here. I can see where I'm going to need, I'm drawing on the wrong side. Angela. We'll get there. It's not a huge problem or issue. You forget, you just go to the reverse and just draw over these places. It's those patchy bits that are vexing me. And it is just running the ball over lightly in the places just to, again and again, in different directions, just to fill that space up or to completely emboss or the vellum. But I hope you can see that I'm having to hold it down with my fingers, that this works beautifully as it is. I've got a strange line going on here. I'm going to just fix that one. Where is it? Right, I can see it. And this may be that I've got quite a hefty set of lines here. You can thicken lines and do everything you want, as you would do with a pen. You can do with a stylus with the vellum. So that's beginning to work nicely, I think. So I'm going to carry on adding some lines over here. And however they fall, they fall. Yeah. As I'm doing it on the wrong side. So they just come down. And I am going to weight the bottom of these. I guess it's focusing on what the purpose of art for you is. If you get pleasure out of creating, if it gives you moments of peace and quiet, a chance for you to give your mind a rest from the events of the day, whether it's personal events or events in the world around us, because there's an awful lot going on at the moment, an awful lot of worry, and a lot of people worrying about a lot of different things, then art serves its purpose that way. If your aim is to be a great and renowned artist, then you have to work hard on developing your style, your skill, understanding it, and getting your name out there and getting people to see what you do. But it's having that confidence in yourself the same way, I think, or a certain amount of confidence in your abilities. Me, I'm lucky enough to be able to make some of my living from art through the colouring books that I do and have done, and will continue to do, no doubt. And I'm very fortunate that I'm able to share my insights, perhaps my encouragement, things I've learnt along the way that I see how I do art with people in a way that hopefully will encourage you. And, you know, I spend a lot of time doing art every day in one form or another, whether it's in my journal as I write and I decorate it, whether it's to do with hand lettering, whether it's to do with projects I'm not talking about yet, or whether it's just for sheer pleasure. Like at 4 o'clock this morning when I wake up wide awake, what do? I'll show you in a moment. I pick up my sketchbook or my journal. I'm not going to show you my journal because that's mine. But I do that until I'm ready to go back to sleep, because I empty my mind that way and calm myself down in the process. So there are many purposes for art. Yeah, I'll draw when I'm out and about sometimes. I'm hoping I'll get a chance to pop out later today somewhere. But I've got a delivery due. I've bought an air fryer. And there's a couple of other things on the way. And I don't know what time that's going to be. So I may be scuppered on my plan. Perhaps in the evening I'll manage is to go somewhere to watch the sunset. Which would be quite nice. I haven't done that since I went meteor hunting on back in the middle of August. I get to see, the colours of the sky at sunset, but I don't always go and watch a sunset somewhere, so perhaps I will. Be quite nice to think about where I can go. So, I'm getting to the point where I'm going to be coming around from this. This is the end. Oh, this is the original line I had. If I put it here, this is the original line I had here. This S shape. It's almost disappeared now, hasn't it? So I'm going to start from here and go around in this kind of fashion to change what's going on here. But again, I'm going to be focusing on, just checking I'm working on the right side. It's like writing. There are different reasons I write. I write to tell, I write to document or to tell people what I'm up to as far as art and other things are concerned. I have got a second blog where I started it to write about the various trips myself and a friend had before the pandemic. We called it Curious Stops and Tea Shops because we always went somewhere that was interesting, and there was always a stop at a tea shop for cake or, food, at least one along the way. So we used to laughingly call them up, get a message going, cake run tomorrow? Aye, I can do a cake run. It's more likely to be ice cream in my case, but I find cake far too sweet these days. So still like it, but I've got to work out how, if I make my own cakes, how I can, less sugar affects them. And if I need to put something else in to counteract that loss of the dry ingredient. And no offence to Americans, but gosh, American cake recipes are so sweet. They're tooth-achingly sweet. National tastes, personal tastes are all very different. So you can see I'm beginning to start from around here, and I am going to have a lovely spiral shape there over the top. And I'll add a few of these here just to bulk out the outside of this so it looks a lot more like a wave curling and roiling. I mean, this is one crazy sea, let's be honest. So I'm beginning to get, if I put it on this side, you'll be able to see what's happening here. It's going to be interesting because I want to back this with some colour, but it's going to be really quite difficult to do that with glue because glue always shows through. But there we go. So I need to do something down in this corner. It's a bit blank. So I'll do that and then I'll finish up. So I think it's having a clear idea of what you get from doing art and what your aims are with it. Said I've been very blessed with being able to be found by editors to work for them in terms of colouring books. But that was it was years in the making and coming, and it was getting my work onto places like DeviantArt, which I still do when I've got something that I want to show on DeviantArt that will fit in there. A lot of my work ends up not very finished because I tend to move along if it's related to the videos and so on. So I think here I'll put something a bit different in just to fill that corner. So I think it'll work out fine. So with these beads, I am going to go back, and in the bigger beads, I certainly am, and I'll show you this side. Ugh. You can see here where I've just been putting the highlights in the beads, just done by pressing into the paper. I'll do these. So I'm just going to put a series of change to the finer end so I can get some dots in here. To get a slightly bigger dot, I am rolling this around, but for the smaller ones I'm just pressing it in just a little bit, and then I'll show you. No white gel pen required is the answer there. These ones I'll do the same. I think there's a couple over around here, but I'll work those ones out. So I'm going to leave this here because it's over an hour, and I will finish drawing this because I think you'll get the idea of what I'm doing. I may record it. Perhaps I shall I? I'll record it and then I'll see what you think. And if you'd like to see it as a video, then I will record that again. I hope you found this useful, something to think about. As I've said, you can do this completely on paper with pens. I just wanted to show you vellum because that had clicked in my mind about Pergamano and how I'd explored this in the past. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. It's the dryer sheets, they always do that to me. As long as I don't start coughing, I'm okay, because that will be an asthma attack. Coughing and then wheezing, never good. And I'll leave it for you to say in the comments whether you want me to post it as a video. I may anyway, because once I've finished drawing, I will be colouring this. So that will definitely be the next video, is how I add colour. Whether I add colour to this, or whether I colour a background page and work out a way. So if I take a piece of the white paper, these will fit over perfectly, but I need to find a way of fixing this. So if I coloured this with just say distress inks, how I can fix this to this once it's flat. My head's going to sewing, and because then the sewing would make a feature of it, but I'm not entirely sure about that either. It may be that I make some kind of frame that this can go in. So, and I do have some square dies for my die cutting machine, so I could cut a frame out and frame it with something behind, but I don't know yet. You can see on that one where I've embossed into the card. So I'll put that there, that might keep it down enough. There we go, bit of heavyweight. And it does need a rest before I do any more work on it anyway, because it's beginning to curl up in a way that is unpleasant. And I will do some more of this over here and see where that takes me. You know, maybe it's something to go in my sketchbook with some notes. Oh, I said I was going to show you my sketchbook very quickly. Hopefully you'll see this. So I've been drawing these crazy things. So if you would like me to do a video on how I've drawn these and what they are, then I'll be more than happy to do them. I've got no idea where the idea for this came from. I'm sure somebody has done it somewhere similarly, but I definitely had it bubble up out of my head. So I'm not claiming I'm the only one, because I'm wise enough to know that with patterns you're never the only one, and you can use things and somebody go, oh, that's Zentangle pattern such and such, and I'll go, is it really? Haven't seen that one before. Okay, somebody else has done it, fine, brilliant, they've given it a name, superb. And I might sound sarcastic, but I'm not being sarcastic. It's part of the Zentangle method, the Zentangle way, and it's fine. I'm fine with it. So I would like to say thank you once again for joining me. I hope to see you here again soon. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. If you have subscribed, thank you so much. So until I see you again, take care, look after yourselves, and find time to be creative. Bye-bye for now. Bye. Hwyl.